50-Year Journey Come Full Circle. Written by Dr. Matthew A. Johnson. I'm Willi Rose, and we are on Chapter 13, taking a stroll down memory lane. The activity level in the Southern Oregon Habituation Area, or SOHA, was slowly but surely beginning to increase. We were beginning to experience more and more visuals, vocals, and tree knocks on the perimeter of the base camp. We were hearing bipedal steps and seeing eye glow on the very edge of camp, only 10 to 15 feet away from us. We were beginning to occasionally see evidence that the younger children were watching us on the perimeter too, and also visiting the gifting bowls, as evidenced by their tiny fingerprints combined with the much larger fingerprints. Those little fingerprints were so cute. One night in Soha, Grady and I entered our tent, climbed into our sleeping bags, and went to sleep. More often than not, I sleep so much better up in the mountains than I do in my own bed at home. Being in the mountains is therapy for this psychologist. However, around 2 a.m. I woke up because I heard some heavy-footed bipedal steps approaching the backside of our tent where our heads were positioned. All of a sudden, I felt myself being zapped. What does being zapped mean? Well, the old schoolers will try to convince you that the Bigfoot forest people are using infrasound to paralyze their prey. The only problem with their theory is that we aren't prey to the Bigfoot forest people, nor are they using infrasound. The effects of infrasound do not match what is actually being experienced while one is being zapped. The effects of infrasound include fear, sorrow, depression, anxiety, nausea, chest pressure, and hallucination. Instead of experiencing the listed symptoms associated with infrasound, I was experiencing a feeling of relaxation, comfort, and peace. When the Bigfoot forest person was zapping me, it was like my body was being immobilized while I was still very consciously alert. I liken it to going into surgery and the anesthesiologist places a mask over your nose and mouth. Then they tell you to count backwards from 10. When you get to 5, you're totally passed out. When you're being zapped, it's like you're at 7.5. You can think, but you can't move. You're not wide awake and mobile like you were at a 10 before you started breathing from the mask. At the same time, you're not a 5 and totally passed out and unconscious either. Once again, I felt relaxed, comfortable, and peaceful. As I laid there in the tent with my body immobilized yet wide awake, I felt a hand about the size of my own slide between my head and my pillow. Keep in mind that I stand 6 foot 9 inches tall, and I have the hands to match. I can palm a basketball without any difficulty at all. Now I know what you're thinking right now. How did the Bigfoot forest person stick his hand between your head and pillow? Was there a hole in the back of the tent? Nope. There was no hole in the back of the tent. Now you're asking, well, then how did he do it? My answer is that I'll get to how he did it later in the book. For now, stay with me as I finish addressing the more important aspects of this story. As I laid there in my sleeping bag inside the tent, with a large hand between my head and pillow, I could see what appeared to be a very fast slideshow going on in my mind. The slideshow, with pictures quickly flashing by, began from my infancy. Before I knew it, 15 minutes later, pictures of being in first grade at the John Jacob Astor Elementary School in Astoria, Oregon, were flashing through my head. Although I was enjoying taking a stroll down memory lane, I wasn't enjoying the fact that our connection appeared to be coming across to me as being very one-sided. Although my body was immobilized, I began to wrestle in my mind with the adolescent Bigfoot forest person in order to sever our connection. How was I attempting to do so? Well, All I can explain to you that in my mind I was pushing, pulling, yanking, leveraging, twisting, and turning in order to stop the memory reading process. By the time we reached my middle school years at Leslie Junior High School in Salem, Oregon, I managed to stop the process. I won. He had to stop and listen to me. I said in my mind, "This isn't fair. This isn't right." The adolescent Bigfoot forest person mind spoke back to me. "What isn't fair? What isn't right?" I said, "You get to read through all of my memories and get to know everything about me, but I don't get to know anything about you. If you want to continue reading through my memories, then I need to be able to ask you some questions too." He immediately responded, "I have to speak with the elders first." I said, "Okay." He disconnected from me. I shot back up to a 10, and he walked away from the Soha base camp through the woods. As I lay there in my sleeping bag inside of my tent, I couldn't believe I experienced what had just happened. I turned my head and looked at the tent wall, and there was no hole in the side of the tent. I couldn't, for the life of me, figure out how he managed to put his hand between my head and my pillow without leaving a hole in the side of the tent. Then I just lay on my back in the dark of the night and waited for his return. About an hour later, as I lay there in the dark, I heard 2 sets of heavy-footed bipedal steps returning to the backside of our tent in the Soha base camp. I had to say that I was excited, not scared, and my heart was beating faster as the adrenaline was flowing. Suddenly, I felt myself being zapped again. I dropped from a 10 back down to a 7.5 again. My body was immobilized, but I was very conscious and aware of what was going on. Next, I felt a much larger hand slide between my head and the pillow. This very large hand pretty much covered most of my head. The palm of the adult male Bigfoot forest person was down by the base of my skull, while his fingertips were wrapped over the top of my head and resting on my forehead. In short, the very large hand dwarfed my hand, and I don't have little hands. The adult male Bigfoot forest person mind spoke to me. "My son said that you wanted to ask me some questions." I responded, "Yes. Why is he reading through my memories?" The elder answered, "That's our way of knowing what is going on with the human race." Well, that made sense to me. It's not like they have CNN or Fox News to watch every day at home. The elder then asked me, "Do you have any other questions?" I responded, "Yes. Who are you?" He immediately answered nonchalantly, "We are guardians of the forest, and we protect all who dwell within. Do you have any other questions?" I responded, "No, I'm fine." Then he asked me, "May my son continue to read through your memories?" I replied, "Yes, he may." The elder said, "Thank you," and removed his hand from between my head and the pillow. I felt the smaller hand of the adolescent male slide between my head and the pillow again. I remember thinking right there and then about the amazing difference in the size of hands. I couldn't believe that the father's hand pretty much wrapped around most of my head. That was a freaking huge hand. Then the adolescent male began reading through my memories again. I was amazed that he was able to pick up where he left off. He didn't have to start all over again from my infancy. It was actually kind of fun as I lay there in the tent, enjoying a slideshow review of the life that I had lived. The weird thing was that I wasn't just seeing all of my memories flash before my eyes. I was also feeling all of the feelings associated with the memories in fast-forward speed. I was feeling happy, sad, afraid, and mad in a quick, repetitive cycle over and over and over again. Naturally, I preferred the happy memories. When the adolescent male had completed reading through my memories, he said, "Thank you," to me. I responded, "You're welcome," back to him. Then he disconnected, slid his hand out from between my head and pillow. I shot back up to a 10. The adolescent male walked away from the Soha base camp with his father. It was really cool laying there and listening to the heavy bipedal footsteps walking away through the woods. Next, as I continued to lay in my sleeping bag inside the tent, I began to question everything. Did this really just happen? Was I dreaming? Was I hallucinating? Did I have a psychotic break? Nope. This really happened. I was wide awake the entire time, and nothing about it smacked of dreaming, hallucinating, or psychosis. Then I suddenly thought to myself, "Oh no, what about Grady?" I turned my body and head to my left to check on him. Grady lifted his head up off of his pillow, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "They spoke with me too, Daddy." Then he laid his head back down on his pillow and fell quickly back to sleep. I just laid there stunned. Crap, this really did happen. I wasn't dreaming, hallucinating, or experiencing a psychotic break. Grady just told me that they spoke with him too. Wait, Grady said they, and not he. Grady referred to them in the plural form rather than using the singular form. In other words, they referred to both the adolescent male and the father, i.e., they spoke with me too, Daddy. Wow. I laid there wondering what they spoke to Grady about. I decided that I would let him sleep and not make a big deal of it with him. After all, he was only 5 years old at the time. I thought I would just wait and hear from Grady about his experience if and when he wanted to share it with me. I reached for my cell phone, turned it on, and began to blow up Cynthia's cell phone with a million text messages. I typed everything that I could remember. I'm sure she was thinking, oh, he's lost his marbles. It didn't matter. I had to tell another adult. Cynthia is my soulmate, so she's going to have to put up with my craziness no matter what. Well, she responded back in a very excited and inquisitive manner. She, too, was blown away by Grady's response to me. They spoke with me, too, Daddy. She also was wondering what they talked about. To this day, I have no idea. Grady can only remember the event, but he doesn't remember the specifics of what they talked about. It doesn't matter to me. What does matter is that he was there with me at the age of 5, experiencing things that most other kids on planet Earth never have the opportunity to experience. Those are memories with his father that he will never forget. Grady has stories to tell his children and grandchildren. Since that time, as I review the event over and over again in my mind, I'm struck by the cultural differences between the human race and the Bigfoot forest people. They seem to do whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it. For instance, zapping, reading through memories, healing, etc. In other words, they don't ask for permission, they just do it. When they're doing it, they're kind, gentle, and respectful. I was never harmed, nor did I feel afraid. On the other hand, when humans attempt to get close and personal with another human, we ask for permission first. If we don't ask for consensual participation, then we are violating human customs and possibly breaking some laws, too. The other thing that comes to my mind when I'm reviewing this experience is the fact that the mind-speak communications with the adolescent male and his father were all very respectful. The adolescent wasn't going to answer any of my questions without speaking to the elders first. I can think of a whole lot of human adolescents who wouldn't give a crap what their elders thought and often proceed with doing what they want to do on their own free will. I was also impressed with how kind and gentle the adult male Bigfoot forest person treated me. Quite frankly, his hand was so huge that he could have simply popped my head open like it was an egg. Instead, he was kind and gentle, asked me questions, allowed me to ask him questions, and then thanked me for my willingness to participate in the memory reading process. In short, there was a whole lot of respect that occurred during the Mindspeak exchange in spite of our cultural differences. However, I soon realized that I was only beginning to scratch the surface. There was a whole lot more for me to learn about the Bigfoot forest people. And that's the end of chapter 13. And we move on to chapter 14. It's called Clarifying My Intentions. You are listening to the reading of the book Bigfoot, A 50-Year Journey, Come Full Circle, written by Dr. Matthew A. Johnson. I'm Willi Rose.